looks like we're live. Here we go. We're live. All right. Welcome. Schreiner Live today. I'll be your host, Dr. Matt Goodwin. I've got with me Dr. Charlie Huber, Mr. David Garrels.
Hello.
And two alumni coming back to visit us today, Mason Wilkes.
How's it going?
And Miguel Hopkins.
How's it going, everyone?
So today is going to be just more of a fun conversation about sports. We'll cover everything from, what we played in when we were little to our favorite sport icons that we follow and sports teams and everything in between. So, everybody ready to jump in?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
It's about the time that I'm going to freeze.
Yep. Sure did.
Everybody else here? Dr. Goodwin's the only one frozen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Looks
I'm
like
still
it.
Must be using a 94 Dell or something. Who knows?
Exactly. Oh man, it's the face that he's making when he freezes that was the best. Here he is.
Yeah, reconnecting.
All right,
We're back. We're back.
we're back.
You're supposed
Wow.
to
I have no idea where I stopped because, on my side, I don't hear it.
Well, we never got the question, so
All right, awesome. So, first question that we're going to start off with is just give us, a bit of background of your sports history, your sports story. What are you connected to? Talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Mason, you want to go?
I'll take it if you don't want to.
Running back lead on. Go ahead.
All right. So, man, my background was sports. I had a little kid, about 2 or 3 years old. Picking up any ball in sight and playing with it. Started playing baseball at 3 years old and played just about any sport you can think of growing up. Anything that kept me outside, that's what I wanted to do. So I was the kid running up and down the neighborhood, knocking on doors, trying to get a game started. No matter what time of the year it was, it could be freezing rain or it can be 100 degrees outside, and I was ready to go out there and play. But man, growing up, following sports and being a part of teams throughout, little league, high school, college, it was all a blast. And kind of my upbringing, I started with this typical baseball, basketball, football, and then once I got to about middle school age is when I started the shooting career that I had, and had a lot of fun doing it. But that's kind of my background and what got me into it. And if you ask my parents, they'd tell you I was a kid at 3 to 5 years old. I'm reading the bottom of ESPN, trying to figure out what every team's doing and what's going on in the sports world. So just always connected in that way.
Nice. All
Mason,
right.
I didn't know you shoot it. You used to shoot guns?
Oh yeah.
Didn't know that. Okay. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
On that national championship.
Wow, I did not know that, Mason. Okay. You just don't brag about that at work or anything.
Shriner's got a shooting team. If you haven't heard, they're pretty good.
I know
They're
that.
pretty good.
Just a couple. Just a couple.
Hey, they've gotten way better since I've been gone. So.
Yeah, I'd say for me, very similar to Mason in terms of, I was that kid growing up as well that was just wanting to be outside and be in the sandlot and finding people around the neighborhood to play sports. I think where I differ was, baseball was life for me. I was born here in San Antonio, but I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. So in Tennessee, I don't even remember the sport of soccer. I don't remember growing up with options of any other sport other than baseball or football. Those were the two that you played. So. And naturally for me, I just loved baseball. So that was one that all my focus and attention was on growing up. So I was outside every day with a wiffle ball and bat, hitting a ball or hitting off a tee or hitting for my dad, whatever it was. So baseball was kind of my upbringing that kind of got me into sports very early, and it was just natural to me. So from day one, when I was 4 years old playing, I told myself I was going to be a professional baseball player. So that was the dream all the way up until things came, shot down in sophomore year of college, which I'll get to shortly. But moved back to Texas and played high school ball. And then obviously I went to walk on and play at Schreiner there for a semester or two. And then that's where it came down where I needed to pick between, my career or continuing sports. And that's where I met Mr. Goodwin himself who got me the first student manager position at the MFC when it was being built. I know we're fossils now, so MFC is all it's old to some people now, but so that's where I first started transitioning into the exercise science part of sports and learning more about the science of it and the business aspect of it. And that's where I switched my major over to sport management. And then from there, it was, just kind of came out, with learning from Shaw and Dr. Wells and all of them. It was, something that just came out of me and it kind of spoke to me as well, too, with my passion. And then from there, I just started, following the sport of soccer and football. And then the rest is history from there, in terms of my career. It's been all 8 years of professional soccer. So I think it just started from all baseball up until college, and then sophomore year at Schreiner. That's where it kind of switched over to soccer took over. So that's kind of my little story there.
Nice. You kind of skipped over the Fluffy Bear history there. You had quite the career of intramural football going on at Schreiner.
That's the Hall of Fame that everyone has and walks by every single day over there. So I don't need to brag about it. Everyone knows they hear those 3 words, what that entails. So, the dynasty, if you will.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the dynasty. David, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So my sports background is a little different than everybody else. I watch a lot of sports. So I tried that, in high school. I tried a lot of different things. I tried basketball. That lasted, 45 seconds, I think, Dr. Huber. And then Coach Fuller said, "Girls, this is not your sport." So baseball, I tried that too. I actually got hit in the face with a ball as it went through my glove. And I was like, okay, I'm done. And if you look at my frame and then drop about 70 pounds off of me, that's what I look like in high school. So football was out. So mainly I ran. So I did cross country and track. Long distance sports was really the only athletics I did, but I followed a lot. I was in the marching band. So I followed our football team pretty extensively. And so football is one of my favorite sports. I was in a small 1A school, so there was that's really the only options you had was the big 3, right? Baseball, football, basketball, or track, right? And if you throw that 4th one in there, so no soccer, but those are my options. I actually wanted to play soccer a lot, but there was no club sports, and I went to Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp one year, and actually lied to them and told them I was a soccer player at the Christian camp. And they quickly knew I was not a soccer player. So, yeah, cross country track, but I do watch a lot and follow it.
Awesome.
The Eagles guy, huh?
Yeah, I am.
I must say, guys, that starting this call off, I'm seeing a Manchester City jersey and an Eagle. I'm about to head out a little early if.
You see that Cowboys helmet up there in the corner there?
Yeah, that's right. I saw it. I didn't say anything. I just let it go.
Needless to say, David's had his hair colored blue several times in the last 2 years.
Yeah, either colored blue or shaved. Yeah, so I bet every year that the Eagles will beat the Cowboys, and I usually lose that. So
hey, you guys still have the most recent Super Bowl, so that trumps everything.
Yeah.
That is true. You can replay the Eagles Super Bowl on DVD, right? I think it's still VHS for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
VHS.
I didn't know that existed. I try to watch good television, so
All right, Dr. Huber, want to jump in?
Well, I think so. My sports story is interesting. As a kid, I played sports and I was very into sports. Like most kids, played baseball and pickup football, all of those things. But it was in junior high when I started playing like organized school sports, and I just began to really excel at football. And I found a love for it and played football and just really enjoyed that in junior high. And then of course went up to high school, my freshman year, made varsity, that kind of stuff. And so really enjoyed football. It was a small school though. David can attest. I played every position, not every position. I never played offensive line, but I will say that at any one point I was the kicker, the kick return, the running back, and the middle linebacker, and I never left the field. And so football was it. But where I really excelled, and which was sort of a sad story, was in weightlifting, because weightlifting was weight class based. And a short, stocky guy has physical advantages in weightlifting, where football and basketball even celebrate the unusually large children. but a weight class based sport like powerlifting or wrestling really is good for certain physical types. And so I excelled at that, but didn't, there was never any aspirations for that. Went to college. I really went to college thinking I was going to play football for A&M. I thought I was that good. I had sort of filled my head with this idea that I could be in the NFL one day, and quickly realized that at my first A&M football practice that that was not the case. I was not good enough to be in the NFL, nor was I good enough to even play at A&M. And so that dream came crashing down around me pretty quickly as I realized my own mortality. And there's some great stories behind that too. But I will say that since then I've loved sports. I played rugby in college. I stayed involved in like adult sports and have connected. One of the things that I don't do often anymore, and it may be just as I've gotten older, as I've had kids, as I've gotten busier with my job, I just don't watch as many sports. I know a lot of people are disappointed now that sports aren't happening, but I can't tell you the last time I watched a baseball game beginning to end. And so I think I would rather play sports than watch them. That's just kind of how I've always been. And so I used to follow the NFL religiously. I even watched, my wife and I were just talking about basketball and how, the 90s basketball teams. But I think that's my sports story. I wanted to be a coach when I was in college, changed my mind when I got to college, and I realized how much time it takes to be a good coach and how I could never really dedicate that much of my life to something that way. But that's me.
Awesome.
And now I'm here.
Yeah. Gosh, well, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, I think, across all of our stories, starting off, kind of at a young age and going through. So, I played, basically all sports growing up. Parents stick you in just about everything from, flag football to baseball to soccer, all those things. So I had a mix growing up. It was about age 6 or so, where soccer kind of started being the go-to sport, consistently playing. About the time I got to probably, I don't know, 10 or so, or maybe around 8, or racquetball was a big thing. It was a big part of my life. That was a family sport. My mom and my dad played. They taught me. Local people here in Kerrville kind of took me under their wing and taught me. Did fairly well with racquetball growing up through middle school, all the way up until about my freshman year of high school. I made junior team Texas twice. I think I was sponsored by Echelon. I was making a move from a small town of Kerrville into the scene of racquetball pretty well. Then I got to high school and had to make a decision for racquetball or soccer, and not a lot of high school age competition around racquetball in Kerrville. When I was here, it was still kind of this up and coming thing. So I chose soccer. So played 4 years high school soccer ball. Got recruited to go play at Schreiner. So I played at Schreiner 4 years. And then, after that, kind of hung it up, continue to play. I'm very competitive, love soccer. That's, kind of my passion of sport of choice. So played up until about 3 years ago consistently. Then I ruptured my Achilles. It sidelined me for a year. Made my comeback year because, I didn't want to go out that way. And then since then I've hung it up and really haven't played since then. But having kids that transitioned into coaching them. So I coach them in their sports from volleyball to basketball to soccer, pretty much anything they want to be involved in. I coach until I can't coach them anymore. Right. They get to a certain age where it's time for the parent coach to go sit in the stands and let somebody else take over, which I imagine when that day comes, this could be very difficult for me. But yeah, that's kind of my story. I kind of like Dr. Huber. I don't watch a lot of sports. I watch soccer. I miss that right now. That was my Saturday, Sunday morning routine. I would get up at 6:30 in the morning and pretty much watch all the games or listen to or follow all the games all day for 2 days. Of course, watching Manchester City in there somewhere. And then that was my weekend. So I'm missing it right now.
I think we're all missing it. We're all missing it bad too.
Yeah.
At least I am.
I was gonna say one of my biggest life accomplishments is actually scoring a point on Matt Goodwin in racquetball one day. Life accomplishment.
Oh man, that was good times. Good time. All right, so we'll move kind of into a little bit closer to home of just conversation of, in your opinion, of course, sports covers so much and a lot of different areas of interest and different sports out there. But if you could think of someone in current time, so we'll do history too, but let's focus on current time. Who do you think is kind of that iconic person in sports right now? For whatever reason, you want to deem them kind of like that iconic person.
Miguel, you can take this one.
You got it. We'll alternate. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah, so I'd say today, I mean, there's a lot of names out there, honestly. I mean, you think of the LeBron James of the world, you look at the Abby Wambachs of the world, et cetera, going all day. I think when it comes to influential to me, I think about those who give back to the sport, those who give back to the youth that are coming up in that sport to keep that sport going and keep it trending. Those who get back to the cities that they played in, just overall giving back. And I think the first person that comes to mind for me is Peyton Manning, and that's obviously biased because being from Tennessee, big Peyton Manning fan. But I think just in terms of how he was throughout his career, in terms of he was always a class act. Always wore the suit after the game. After getting hit, knocked down 10 times, he was there still in a suit, being professional. Always talking about his teammates. Always talked about family, always talked about the right principles of bringing to the game and how you represent the game. And I think that's kind of what I was lucky to grow up with. And, in my terms of watching sports, I was able to watch the Peyton Mannings, the Derek Jeters, Tim Duncan, right? Just the class acts, the ones who just, not in the headlines for, talking mess or talking smack. It was, they went out and played the game, and that's how they spoke, was what their game. So I'd say influential for me would be Peyton Manning, just because of, again, who he is now and the way he's giving back nowadays. He's not away from, yes, he's not playing anymore, but he's doing Peyton places. He's doing his own thing where he's still spreading the word about the game and getting people involved and keeping the fans engaged. Not to mention, he was just there the other day surprising the University of Tennessee class one day, because they were doing the first day of virtual online classes. So he just popped in and just jumped in to say hello. So just always giving back, always finding ways to help people around the country, and doing his clinics from quarterback clinics, from leadership clinics. I just think of him as the high caliber, influential person, who's just well-rounded, always giving back and always thinking of others, with a class act and always being that way everywhere he goes. So I would say Peyton Manning for me.
It's a good one.
All right,
I would have to agree with the aspect of everybody's going to go for the LeBron James, the Michael Jordans of the of the sport itself. But I think media plays such a big role nowadays in what people think and how they think of an individual or of a sport now. And what I really see in that is that you see these people like LeBron James, and like Miguel mentioned, everybody's giving back to their communities now and being able to really help develop their sports. LeBron's such the household name right now. There's really, to me, I don't see any competition with it. But when you take a look at what time of year it is and what the media is portraying to everybody, that can really play a part in what is going on. I like to also look at Kobe's legacy and what he was doing in life after basketball. Life after basketball, he was in China, he was in movies, directing movies, he was in China developing the basketball game and developing companies over there, and also here in the United States. It was just incredible to see the amount of impact he had on his game even after he was done. Like Miguel said, Peyton Manning was giving back to Tennessee, was there doing different things with with his alma mater, and really showing what coming through his sport did for himself and what it's doing for everybody else in the sport. And just seeing what Kobe's legacy is now going to continue to do and what he was doing already before, the tragic accident. It was very impressive to me to see how he was able to grow his name and the Laker name. And it's hard to grow a Laker name when you think of all the greats that played for that team there. And he was able to do that. And it's still just his impact on the game and on sports in general is huge.
Dr. Goodwin, you said icon today, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if
Both.
today's icon, I think, is without a doubt the first person everybody names is LeBron James. And in looking at the definition in today, I mean, if I go back in time, and if we, depending on how you ask the question, I think my answer might change, similar to what Mason or Miguel have stated. But right now, at this moment, if you were to say who is the sports icon in the world, it's hard to pick anyone other than LeBron. And regardless of whether you like him or not, he's the first name that pops into your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and so no, I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't, he's been married to the same woman, has, kids. He's never been arrested. He's done charity work. He's, people just kind of clown on him a little bit for leaving teams and his loyalty. But at some point he's the best player in basketball right now, maybe ever, you could argue. But more than anything, he represents all professional sports somehow across the world even. And I know there's certain soccer athletes that might claim this, in Africa or on other continents where he may be more well known, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's universally as known and is considered a professional athlete as LeBron James.
Yeah. I'll go a little bit of a different route. I'm thinking in the modern eras, the last like 3 to 4 years, probably, I guess you could say. And so influential on sports. And whether you agree with the guy or you like the guy or not, it doesn't matter. But Colin Kaepernick has really, through the stuff that he's done, has brought so much attention to the NFL. And whether you agree with his tactics or you don't agree with his tactics, I mean, you can't even watch, or I know I haven't been able to in the last couple of years, watch a ball game when they're panning through and you're showing the national anthem, who's standing, who's not, who has their hand over their heart, who doesn't, those types of things. Um, and I think he was really influential on as for that media bias or the media base, like Mason was saying, is he turned the media's attention that way. And so I'd probably say him in the last couple of years is another influential person.
Okay. Yeah, the direction I would take, it's similar with you, David, right? I mean, there's so many different directions you can take this, play style, charity, giving back, role models, things like that. But just, as an individual sort of icon within, like, say, the USA women's national team, right? Like Megan Rapinoe, right? You could take her or leave her, she is who she is and she's out there and she makes bold statements and does bold things, but if you're talking like iconic, that's going to continue to push through, really in developing and carving out a history that is ongoing as they continue to write that story. And she's kind of there leading that charge and being a part of that. So I think for me, that's a fun part of sports is there's so many different ways that it impacts the world around us, from just simple entertainment to role model to, to everything in between. And you can really look at it in a lot of different ways and appreciate it in a lot of different ways. So if you could, pick more of a historic, right? And this is kind of hard, and gosh, we could probably talk about this for decades and years and years.
It's an ongoing debate.
Ongoing, right? But if you were to think through and, maybe pick one person historically, that you can think of that had that big impact, who would that be? It doesn't have to be 100 years ago. It could be 10 years ago. But
well, and I thought about this earlier, and it's funny. I'm going to mention another basketball player, but here's the thing: I'm not even that much of a fan of basketball. I don't know that I could name that many. But when I look at the trajectory of sports, again, it's having an influence. So no one commercialized sports in the way that Michael Jordan did. I mean, before Michael Jordan, there were endorsement deals. There were, and you can name, sports figures have always been this, but none launched it in, went from this ground sort of, oh, we're going to get an athlete to drink our orange juice or be on a Wheaties box, to athletes as their own brand with their own image. Michael Jordan pushed everything into that direction. And I would say, so as an influencer, Miguel was talking about Peyton Manning wearing a suit. Jordan would not be interviewed in locker rooms. He had to, his image was so important to him. He had to maintain that constantly. And so, again, I think influential on today's sports and the way that money is sort of used in sports and how people make money on endorsements and the expectations of professional athletes now. I think Michael Jordan had such a profound influence across all sports because of that. You know, Nike and what they did with Michael Jordan has made everything is changed the game. And so I'm going to go with Michael Jordan. Again, not necessarily my favorite athlete, not my favorite sport, but hard to argue that anybody else. I mean, there are other people who definitely influence sports, but man, for me, it's Michael Jordan.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you leave a sport and you still have athletes wearing your shoes as they play that sport, that's something.
The man retired, came back, and won another championship. Like, you don't see that often, if at all, that you retire, come back at an older age like that, and you're still able to run your team and be competitive like he was with the Bulls in the 90s.
And then go play baseball.
Yeah, and then go play baseball. I mean, I don't think that turned out as well as he had hoped, but but he did it. He can say he did it. So
Right.
not many people at all can say that and say they were successful.
Yeah.
I'd say one of my historically influencing people has done both, and that's Bo Jackson, right? Remember, that's probably before some of y'all's time, but that's watching. But Bo knows, man, that was like a household saying, and you said it all the time, and he shook up the world of football, and everybody wanted to run like he did, right? And then he went and played baseball, and he was pretty decent at that too, you know. And so, I think if in my memory, he's the first guy that kind of did that, branched out of one professional sport into another that I know of, and there's probably more, but and so that kind of set the tone for other folks who wanted to do that later on for Michael or whoever else, you know, had the opportunity to do that. And so I would say Bo, he also commercialized pretty well on his name and that marketing image. But yeah, it's hard to top Michael's.
It's hard to top, but kind of going off that, a name that comes to my mind, and this he didn't really. He did play multiple sports, not necessarily at a professional level, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he turned an athletic career into now he's a movie star. You know, he's taken where he made his name in the WWE or WWF, whatever it was at the time when he was in it, and he has taken his legacy that he built there and just continued to grow it now in the acting world. And I'm watching Ballers right now. HBO series. I didn't watch it when it first came out, and I saw that it was on Hulu, so I started watching it. And man, seeing where his career started as an athlete in WWE and kind of where he's taken that and what he's been able to do with his personal career, that's pretty amazing to me to see. Now he was kind of the first one to do it. Now these guys like John Cena are going into acting roles, and they're kind of leaving the WWE and or being only in these events that 5 or 10 times a year compared to their nightly wrestling basis that they were doing.
Well, and a lot of people forget Dwayne Johnson. You know, he played for the national championship Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
You know, he was a pretty solid athlete in football in college. But it reminds me, you know, as you were saying that, I was thinking about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his athletic career as a someone who came from another country, really with a dream. And I mean, this guy busted his butt to become like a household name, you know, with all of the disadvantages he had. You know, this guy stepped up and then made a career in bodybuilding, became an actor, then became governor of the most liberal state in America. You know, how does that happen? But pretty influential there.
Yeah. I think for me, it's another hard one in terms of, you know, again, so many names that you can think of. I mean, heck, a top five. I'm already thinking of Pele and Mia Hamm, and you know, just from, you know, historically, you know, again, Babe Ruth, heck, but Michael Jordan, you know, as well. I think for me, it's not necessarily someone that was commercialized or anything like that. I think mine is just more so on someone who actually saved one of the leagues here in the United States, and then you know, impacted a few others in the same time. Lamar Hunt. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lamar Hunt, but just the pioneer of soccer in the United States. You know, for in those times, like we all mentioned, we don't really remember soccer growing up too much or playing it or there being signups, but you know, he was the founder of Major League Soccer in the United States. He saw what was going on around the rest of the world and how it was the world sport, and we don't have it going on over here, or at least to a minimal level. but was able to get owners together and develop teams and build stadiums. And when they thought they were going to go under due to the support of no one's really, there's football and baseball. There's no room for soccer in the United States to push that a little bit more and continue to. I mean, if it's not for Lamar Hunt, we don't have soccer in this world. And I think just in terms of what he did, of saving a whole sport altogether to convince a few owners to stay on board and wait it out and think about his plans for the league going forward. And then, bam, that's where it started blowing up, a little bit later on, with some of the World Cups and such. But not to mention his impact on the NFL, having the American Football League. Now it's why we have the AFC versus NFC now, right? He was the one that kind of wanted to, go in there and challenge the NFL to be in this, this target on their head of the, the biggest league in the world, or arguably, right? So I think Lamar Hunt comes to the top of mind for me, just in terms of the pioneering that he did for soccer and NFL. And then obviously there's even still a tournament now that you guys are probably familiar with, the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup, which is a tournament that actually San Antonio FC and all of the leagues from literally semi-pro to, USL to MLS all the way up, but allows all of the soccer levels at every level to be able to play in this tournament. And I think that's something awesome to honor him of who he was and what he did for the sport here in the United States.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's hard for me to narrow down to like a person, but when I think historically, I think baseball. Like the history of baseball, of the struggles that came through, the different people that came through it. Babe Ruth, Pete Rose, things like that.
Robinson.
People like that. Robinson, yeah.
Jackie.
Yeah. There's so much history within that era of baseball that kind of helped pave the way, not just for baseball, but just professional sports, and the idea of that, kind of what we're accustomed to nowadays, had to start somewhere and kind of started, there. And even more difficult, right, back then, because you weren't, getting the huge paychecks and things of that nature the way they are now. And you were really almost playing, for yourself, but a bit of like for a cause and something bigger than you as well. It really was a kind of a special time in that sense. All right, so back to a little bit more of just a fun question, and this could be more than just one team. But what are some teams that you guys follow? Maybe why? If you you probably kind of notice that there's people that you don't necessarily follow like the hometown team, right? So usually people have a reason for following certain teams. But just curious, what are some teams and different sports that you guys follow?
So when I was a kid,
Go ahead.
So when I was a kid, everybody in Texas loves the Dallas Cowboys or the Houston Oilers, and I guess now the Texans, that the Oilers moved to Tennessee, and I was kind of an Oilers fan. I liked Warren Moon and Curtis Duncan and those guys back there. Y'all may not remember the electric slide, but so the Oilers. I never really liked the Cowboys. And for a variety of reasons, but it just seemed like the low hanging fruit, and my family all liked that. So I remember one day watching a game with my uncles, and it wasn't Thanksgiving. It may have been the week before. I can't remember, but the Cowboys were playing the Packers. And I said, you know what? I'm going to cheer against the Cowboys I was that kind of kid. And I picked the Packers. And ever since then, they've been the team that I followed. And so I, for no reason, I've realized no other reason than, as a kid, I just made the decision. And so what I've realized over the years as I've followed the team and sort of grown closer to, caring about whether the team wins or loses, what I've realized is there are a lot of Packer fans everywhere. I think America, Dallas has claimed America's team, but really they're Texas team, which Texas does sort of lead the nation in a lot of ways. But outside of Texas, there's Cowboy fans. But everywhere I've been, if I'm wearing a Packers shirt or a sticker on my whatever, somebody's like, "You're a Packers fan? We love the Packers." Even when I've gone to home games in Dallas, more Packer fans will show up to watch the Dallas versus Packers than any other away team. And so it's always fun to be a part of that and sort of rib on all my friends that are Cowboys fans who, not that the Packers and Cowboys necessarily have a rivalry that would equal the Eagles and the Cowboys at this point in time, but it's definitely that's been my team. As far as other sports, I really don't care. I mean, we were trying to pick soccer teams in the office, and I'm pretty much if you've ever seen the Saturday Night Live video, American Football Coaches Soccer, I feel like that's me. I have not. Somebody please explain offsides to me. So I don't have a soccer team. I don't have. I kind of root for Brazil if the U.S. isn't in the World Cup because that's my brother's team. Outside of that, baseball, I like the Astros. That's mainly because it's a Texas team, and I can't cheer for anybody from Dallas. And then basketball, maybe the Houston Rockets for the same reason. I like the Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs are okay, but it's Packers.
I'll go next and just segue into that as the Cowboys fan and just say Dez caught it. Charles.
Secondly, matter.
He catches that. That's a touchdown. We win. No, I'd say for me, guys, I'll probably start with the biggest story. That's Manchester United. Obviously, with Matt, we're in his Manchester City at our obviously our rival. But that's the biggest question that I always get. Hey, you're not from England, never been to England. Why the heck are you a Manchester United fan? And my story behind it's pretty unique. It's actually led to where I am and where I work professionally now. And that's because, again, I mentioned that baseball was my life growing up, all the way until my sophomore year in college. It was literally baseball. And then that's where I got invited over by a couple of my baseball buddies there at Schreiner on campus. Says, hey, come on over. We're playing a little video game. We're just hanging out. We'll see what we're going to do later. And I was like, what are y'all doing? We're playing FIFA. I was like, that's soccer? And they're like, yeah. I was like, why are y'all playing soccer? Who does that? And they're like, no, just it's fun. Come on over. And so I went over there and got talked into it, peer pressure. And they told me I jumped on the game there and started playing. And the very first team I played was Manchester United. So then I started learning that's the only team I knew, I saw the logo. I started learning the players, Wayne Rooney, Berbatov, O'Shea, just all those guys. And so the World Cup was that summer where actually I got on with Matt and we watched the World Cup in South Africa. And that's literally where soccer just blew up for me. So it was FIFA, drew my interest, started learning the game, the strategy a little bit, found a team. I sensed, it could have been anybody. It could have been Newcastle or it could have been Norwich City, who I played with, but just happened to be Manchester United. So since then, I've been a diehard Manchester United fan. Was fortunate enough to see them when they came to Houston a couple of years ago and do the first Manchester Derby outside of England and the United States. So that was remarkable. But Manchester United, and then of course San Antonio FC, the pro soccer team in San Antonio, for due reasons. San Antonio Spurs, grew up, loved them ever since I grew up in Tennessee. I was a Spurs fan because my mom, when we were growing up in Tennessee, she was a diehard Cowboys and Spurs fan. So that's where I get Cowboys and Spurs from her, even growing up in Tennessee. So obviously you mentioned the Spurs, diehard Cowboys. I'm an FC Dallas fan. That was actually my first job after Schreiner. When I graduated from Schreiner on a Friday, I had a job for FC Dallas that following Monday. So I moved to Dallas literally that next day with a trash bag of clothes with ties and khakis and to go figure it out, right? So that was my first job, and it was Major League Soccer. So FC Dallas is my team there. St. Louis Cardinals in baseball. That's growing up in Memphis. The AAA team for the Cardinals is the Memphis Redbirds. So that kind of ties over. I can watch all those players going into the farm system and then going up and playing for the St. Louis Cardinals. So that's my baseball team there. And then just to wrap it up, U.S. men's and women's national teams, love supporting them anytime they're on TV, anytime they're in a cup, anytime they're in a tournament, World Cup, whatever it is. Love watching both of them to represent the country. And then University of Tennessee athletics. Again, that ties in with my dad and his side. All of my dad's side of the family are all UT fans. They're all wearing the right orange, not the dark, the wrong orange, the right orange, which I always say. But anything with the Tennessee and the volunteers there, and then of course Schreiner Athletics. So follow you guys, of course, since graduation, watching the soccer team, the volleyball team, the golf team, the shooting team, and just continue to support anything that you guys are doing from an athletic standpoint as well. So.
Matt, I know you want to talk about soccer. It's probably easy to go off that.
You mean to talk about Manchester City right now? Yeah, like Miguel, like Manchester City, I kind of get it too, right? Because, I became a Manchester City fan when they were average, right? They were middle of the pack, and
which was often.
Up until recently.
And then we took that spot.
But I always got questioned because everybody else around at the time were like Manchester United fans, right? Which I think is a little bit of me going against the grain. It's just kind of my nature to do. I don't want to be. I want to be a little bit different, right? But it was like at the same time, I wasn't really following soccer like that. I had friends, Ben Jones, he huge Arsenal fan. He started watching them in high school. I didn't really start watching Manchester City, until probably I started my professional career, outside of college, right? I just didn't really find the time to really pay attention to, the sport side of soccer that way. But just fell in love with the team. Again, just I picked them because they were against Manchester United and I wanted to be that guy, right? So it just kind of took off from there. David Silva is my favorite player. He's fixing to retire, supposedly. There's always some article coming out that it says one thing and then something else, but that kind of led me into the MLS, right? I mean, I kind of followed it, right? The Dallas FC, Miguel, when you took over there, I started watching them mainly because of you. Most recently, the new Miami team that's coming with David Beckham, what he's doing. The rumor is maybe David Silva's going to play with them. So I'm a player follower to team. So if that's rumors true, my new team is Miami, right? So I'm going to follow my player. So that's kind of my soccer world. So I get a lot of grief. Oh, you jump yeah, no, I'm not a bandwagon guy. I was there, not in the weeds with everybody else when they first started, but I held on as they climbed and continued to, win championships and trophies. And, it's one of those things now, right? Football, I was a huge Oilers fan. That was a family team in the house. Every Sunday we'd sit down, we'd watch the Oilers, right? That was the thing. Warren Moon, right? That was it. I still remember watching them play the Buffalo Bills and losing, and that was still devastating to this day. Yeah. How do you do that, right? How do you blow that lead? So there was that. Since they went on to Tennessee, I didn't really have a team to follow. I wasn't much of a Dallas Cowboys fan. It was you're either Houston or you're Dallas, right? So you're Houston, so you don't switch. So since then, I kind of just as they get closer to playoffs, or maybe pick one team that year I'm going to follow. This past year, for whatever reason, I was like, hey, yeah, the Browns will do something this year, and they didn't do anything. They stayed true to who they were. But I jumped on the Kansas City bandwagon for the Super Bowl, so that's my NFL. I don't really have a team to follow. I used to follow the Spurs in basketball, a huge, Tim Duncan, David Robinson fan. David Robinson, he was the guy, right? Twin Towers, the back and forth with the Houston Rockets. And that was amazing. A lot of fun to watch. And then when David Robinson retired, I continued watching, and then the closer you got to the end of Tim Duncan's career, I found that I stopped watching as much, for whatever reason. Just nowadays, I'll kind of keep track of it, but I'm not seeking out a game. Baseball is kind of the same way. Astros fan when they make the playoffs. Right? I'm not seeking out games and stuff. For me, it's soccer. Right. I'm gonna I seek out and I watch not just my team in soccer, but I keep track of other teams as well. So those are kind of my teams.
Yeah, no, similar to that. You have your teams that you follow religiously, and then you have the teams that you support, right? I'm one of the hometown boys that I support my hometown team. So anything Houston, I'm all over it. So I'm big. My number one was baseball. So Astros, big Astros guy. That might get me in a little bit of trouble now that they've had all their scandal out and everything. But I'm not going to waver from that. That's my team. That's my go-to. I'm going to support them till the day I die. That's going to be my go-to team. Basketball-wise, it's going to be the Houston Rockets. The Spurs have grown on me since I had been working there, and I've always supported the Spurs. It's just, when you have your go-to team, you can't really pull off of that, and that's going to be the Rockets for me. And then of course football. Football's a tough one for me right now. I was Texans. I wasn't really around for the Oilers, but the stories I heard from my grandparents, that's how I got into football. Was my grandfather before he passed away, and my grandmother now. They huge Texans fans, and my granny still has a Houston Texans Christmas tree up right now because that's just she has a room that she dedicates to the Texans. It's a Texans room. So the Texans for me, but recently I've said I'm going to quit supporting the Texans because of the decisions that have been made there by their GM and head coach, Bill O'Brien. So I'll announce here first. I've told a few buddies, but Now going to be a Carolina Panthers fan. So I'm a Teddy Bridgewater fan. Teddy Bridgewater fan, liked what he did there, like Christian McCaffrey. Follow Matt Rule from Baylor. I've followed him and his Baylor time, and then now seeing him get to go to the NFL. That's going to be my new NFL team, and I'm gonna stick to that. See how long I can stick to that. I know I'm still going to be watching the Texans when they come on, but outside of the three main sports that I follow there, like Miguel was saying, whenever you start working in sports and you go to these different organizations, man, being with the Rampage for 2 years now, I really grew to love the St. Louis Blues as a professional team. Got to follow them the first year I'm there. They go on. We have Jordan Bennington's on our team here in San Antonio, and he ended up being like our second or third string goalie on an AHL team, right? Comes in, gets a few starts after our goalie got hurt, and he ultimately went on to become the Blues goalie that year. The Blues called him up, became the starter, and they went all the way and won the championship in that last season. So that was pretty amazing for me to start my hockey kind of fandom there and get to watch a process like that happen. There's nothing cooler than watching that happen, and you have clients that are huge fans of that team that you're talking to on a daily basis and getting to interact with them at games. And I actually went and bought the video game, NHL video game, so I could learn the game because I wanted to be able to have those conversations. I wanted to be able to, not necessarily show my support to that team, but it did grow to that. But being able to connect with these people, sports really allows you to connect on a different level with a lot of people in the time we're in today. So that's really where my fandom goes. And soccer wise, I'm not as big into soccer. The FIFA parties that you had at Schreiner where everybody was there playing, and I definitely did that. Definitely had a few teams that I'd play with, but soccer fandom, I haven't really gotten too far into that, but that's kind of the extent that I have there.
Okay. David, we're going to talk about the Eagles. We're going to move on. Go ahead.
Well, first off, I really only follow really two sports now as English Premier League, right? And I'm a Leicester City fan. I've only been watching for a couple of years. Matt got me into that. We watched the World Cup again, this last time. Pretty much every game we could sneak in, we did, and it was so much fun. So he's like, okay, now you got to have an English Premier team because the rest of us have one. So I did my research, and the only team that I found that was kind of not really an underdog, they're kind of middle of the road kind of a team. They've had some success, they've had some failure, but they also, when I looked at their jersey, they didn't have like a betting organization on the front. And so I was like, hey, I'll go with those guys. And plus they play out of King Power Stadium, which sounds really cool. And so they have King Power on the front of their jersey. So I was like, that's great. And they're doing pretty good, I guess. So they were until the world shut down, and they were, I think, in third place there. So that's the team I follow for English Premier. And then other thing I follow is football. I used to be all things Houston, right? Same thing. I was more of a player follower too, like Matt said. So Hakeem Olajuwon was my favorite basketball guy. So I watched the Rockets, and then I liked the Stros when the Killer Bees were playing. Those were super cool. I like that a lot. I haven't watched that since. And that's really how I became an Eagles fan anyway. I was an Oilers fan, and Love You Blue didn't love us anymore and left, and it went to Tennessee where there is no oil. And so I had to find another team, and I loved Brian Dawkins was one of my favorite college players. I just loved the intensity that he played with. And then he went to the Eagles, and then I attended CNF Falls State University, and Jeremiah Trotter was our middle linebacker there, and he got drafted to the Eagles. And so at SFA, not a lot of your players get drafted into the NFL, and that's the year I went was the year he was drafted. So I started paying attention to the Eagles, and they became my favorite team. And so it's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of bald heads and cold winters, blue hair since, but finally got the ring. My dad's a Cowboys fan. My mom's a Redskins fan. I'm an Eagles fan. all of us hate the Giants, but it's really interesting around Thanksgiving. So, but those are the teams that I follow currently.
All right, so we'll kind of move into a question that why do you think that we and people just in general have this connection? And I'm going off script a little bit, but the way you guys are talking about it, I was talking about it. We have this passion towards these teams, towards these individuals, who most likely will never meet ever, right? But we take ownership of them as it's an extension, of not necessarily who we are, but how we identify, right, ourselves with, this part of our lives. So I'm just curious, why do you think that, we have, such strong ties and connections to, sports or, different teams, things like that?
I think, from the beginning of time, as early as you can go back to even primitive times, there were games and sports that people played, organized activities, whether it was wrestling. I mean, the Olympics and how far they go back, and if you couldn't compete at that level, you tended to be a spectator for it, and so it was always about. It was as much about the athlete on the field or the court or the or whatever track. It was as much about them and the joy they derive from it as it was the people watching. And so I think at some point we've just it's in our DNA somehow. Somehow people are connected to competition, and competition for survival. And if you're not competing to survive, you're wanting to watch competition. We have that drive for it, and so I think we identify with it. When I wrote a paper in grad school about connecting with your university, and one of the things you can tell fans of their college sports when they refer to, now we do this in professional sports, but college sports is interesting. So, I interviewed these 4 students from Duke, and they formed an organization years ago called the Cameron Crazies. And they were talking about the Duke basketball schedule as if they were on the team. And so you see this with people sometime, next week we're going to play North Carolina, and that's a tough game. We've got this happening, and, they've got an awesome point guard. And these were little guys who all they did was paint themselves blue and stand in the stands and yell. But the way they talked about the team as if they were on the team. This was their team. They felt just as connected to that as anyone, and you see this in college sports. You see it in professional sports now, people who identify with it. But you have on the opposite end people who are just absolutely anti-sports. I think sports have existed for millennia and have been around since people have been around. And I think we're connected because it's in our DNA. I think we just love competition, and we love to root for teams. People will choose the underdog almost every time because you love that story. It's in our pop culture now with movies. Really comic books are all sports based when you begin to think about how they're derived from competition between good and evil. And we sort of translate that into the sports world as we narrate these stories. NFL films used to do it better than anybody. The way the Sable, and those guys back in the day would explain the great conflict between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, and you would get into those giant, larger than life stories. I think it's just part of who we are.
That's great, Charles. And I think I'll segue into that as well too. I think for me, when I think about all my teams here and why I root for them, I think, Matt, it comes down to, it ties into family for me, honestly. When I go back and think about every one of those teams, it was just kind of instilled from, my mom or my dad or my brother. For instance, the Spurs and the Cowboys, they came from my mom. She was born and raised here in San Antonio, and that's how she was raised, Cowboys and Spurs, And so I was, very young, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, growing up watching Cowboys and Spurs. Where my dad, it was all baseball since I watched baseball, and he was my coach, and we spent a lot of time just with baseball. Now going to Memphis Redbirds games, and then we were Cardinals fans going to Busch Stadium. So baseball with my dad, and then I think with my brother, we kind of shared the football sense. So again, Cowboys as well, but also we shared, we haven't even talked about, we this is considered a sport, but WWE, sports entertainment. I had that with my brother. We grew up from a very young age watching wrestling, watching Stone Cold and Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and all this sports entertainment, right? So that's another family piece for me as well too, WWE. And then I think that the unique thing for myself personally is the soccer side, because again, I mentioned none of my family watched it. We didn't really have it in Tennessee, or, my mom didn't really care for it as well. And, until I came here in sophomore year of college. And since then, soccer has been my thing going forward. So I think when I have my kiddos one day, and I'll have them maybe watch some soccer, not force them, of course, like Matt does, but just teasing. I think it's going to be something for me and my kiddos to share with the soccer, FC Dallas and Manchester United and San Antonio FC, and that love going forward. But I think it ties back to family for me, man. Now that I think about it, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's just subtle hints of, baby blue paint on the walls in the house. I don't force them, but subliminally.
That's right.
No, I definitely, to Miguel's point, I think family played a huge role in what I support. And, I think sports in general, me growing up as a kid, I had a dream just like anybody that they want to be a professional athlete. It's like Dr. Huber said, it's the competition's in our DNA somewhere. Like we just kind of go to that whenever anything's happening. You're in a work atmosphere. I know we do the tribal games now for incoming freshmen, and it's fun because competition is just a huge part of our lives now. And now being able to develop a dream and have that dream, and not everybody's going to get to succeed and be a professional athlete. It's how they relate to these professional athletes and how the professional athletes have been able to include so many people in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. You could probably, you see Tua right now getting ready for the draft. Everything's virtual. We're sitting here watching a video of him work out and show what he can do. Like anybody can go do that, but he's able to, he's the one at that level right now that is kind of, we're living through him right now. I think that's why a lot of people like to watch sports. I think that's why fandoms start, because you get connected to these players of that may have got to succeed in what you were dreaming of doing one day. That's kind of where I go, and the connection for me would be the family aspect, and having my grandfather take me to Astros games whenever they couldn't sell a ticket. That's when I gained my biggest fandom. Was getting to go to so many games because they weren't selling very many tickets, sitting so close, getting to know these players, giving the high fives. And that's really where it all starts. And I think that's where the connection is built.
Mason, I can't wait to hear about you one day when you're a grandfather telling your grandchildren about the switch from Houston to Carolina. I'm looking forward to it. Right.
That's good. It's going to be a tough one, but until the coach GM is something's done with that, I just don't know that. So the owner, Bob McNair, passed away, obviously, and his son has taken over the team. And there's just been like no changes since he has passed away. So I don't know if they're just comfortable with him or what, but he's not doing too hot from what I can see on the outside looking in. And I think a lot of people share that opinion. So it's just going to be tough having such a good team. Like we've been in the playoffs, 5 out of the last 7 years. Competing in the playoffs, competing with these really great teams, and just seeing how it hasn't been torn down completely, but you're trading your best player for, a second round pick and a washed up running back. Like it's tough to see that happen. And then they use an excuse that it was going to cost them too much money. Well, then they go and get Brandon Cooks that cost, if not the same, more than, what DeAndre Hopkins was. I don't know. It's tough for me to be a fan after all that's gone down.
That's just
but you're still a fan. You're still going to be watching it.
I'm still, it's
see, that's funny because you said you weren't around for the Oilers, Mason, but that's how it feels being a fan of the Oilers. It's the same thing. It's a Houston thing. We get these great players and just trade them for no reason at all.
So I don't know. Carolina, go Panthers.
That's awesome. I think for me, when it comes down to the why sports, Mason kind of mentioned it, but for me, it's something I couldn't do. Right, I didn't have the frame for it. I didn't have the build for it. Even when I was playing football and trying that out, I was blind. I can't see, right? And we couldn't afford sports goggles. So, and I'm playing defensive back. So it's kind of important for you to be able to see the tight end and know when the ball's coming. I think that's why my favorite player too, or most of my favorite players are all in the defensive backfield. And, it's just things that I just couldn't do. I couldn't play soccer, so I like to watch soccer. I wasn't going to make the team for the varsity or whatever for football, so I started watching it. So for me, it's that I get to kind of live out that um, I guess the dream to be a player even at a small level. I wasn't that great, and so I became a fan instead. Dr. Huber was talking about being loyal to your university and those types of things. I couldn't play on the team, so I was going to try to be the best fan that was in the stadium. That type of a thing. There's obviously family ties there too, because I always make sure that I'm at my dad's house when one of the times the Eagles plays the Cowboys. I got to be there, so we can give each other a hard time about it. But yeah, that's probably the reason I watch it so passionately, because I'm competitive, and I like competition too. Just have to find a different way to go through it.
Yeah.
Not being a star athlete.
Yeah, for me, it's I get to continue to, I guess, live through my playing career, right, by watching, so picking Manchester City, I picked them all of it too because I like the way they play. Like I've always liked the flow of watching them play. For me, soccer is very much of a strategic dance between two teams playing keep away until someone finally breaks down, right? It's a very intricate, almost an art form when I'm watching it, right? So I get a lot of joy just watching the game, right? If it's 0-0 tie, people, we hate that, right? America's like, oh my God, it's a tie. Somebody's got to score. I'm completely okay with it. Like I enjoyed watching the flow of the game, but that's just me because I get to watch it from, my perspective from being an ex-player in that way. The idea of the underdog story too is there, but I think one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to the Premier League as well is it's kind of built around the idea of domination. It's a point system. You want to be the best and then continue to be the best, right? So when those goals come, one is okay, two is okay, but you just keep going and you just keep going, and it's the same across all the teams within that league, right? I mean, they're all kind of trying to attempt to do the exact same thing, is score those goals because they need those points. So I'm kind of drawn to it that way because it's just different, right? Because you can, it's easy to go for the underdog and other sports and jump on a bandwagon and thing like that. But I'm drawn to the idea of the sports for the connections too, right? I mean, if Arsenal beats Manchester City, I'm waiting for a text from Ben Jones. Same thing from Miguel, right? If or vice versa, if Man City's winning, I'm sending out texts, but I'm not gonna send a text if we lost, right? So it's there's that connection and that fun piece of banter that goes back and forth. So it really just kind of becomes kind of a part of me in that sense of following the team and just sports in general, the competition piece, right? Like I think Dr. Huber is right. It's just kind of ingrained in our DNA, right? Whether you follow sports or not, like competitive piece is there. So the sports just allows us to have that outlet. So, well, guys, we're coming up on the hour, so I think we'll probably a good spot to end for the night. I know we didn't get through all of our questions, but we appreciate you guys being with us tonight and sharing your stories and your thoughts.
We appreciate you having us. And
yeah, absolutely. It's been good. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here, for real.
Anything we can do to give back to the great Schreiner University, you guys let us know. We're always here to help you guys out in full support, and hopefully we can get back up to Kerrville again very soon.
Yeah, come visit.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
Thanks,
like Miguel said.
We all stay safe.
Good.
Talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate